Number 1.
William was last seen in the hallway outside of his Brooklyn, New York City, New York apartment on February 11, 1927. He was playing with two neighbor boys, a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old. The older boy went inside his apartment and when he returned, both William and the 3-year-old were gone. The 3-year-old was found alone up on the roof of the apartment building. When questioned about William, he stated that a bougie man had taken the child. Later that day in Brooklyn, a streetcar motorman, Joseph Meehan, noticed an elderly man attempting to pacify a small boy. The boy, who did not have a coat or hat on although the weather was cold, was crying and saying he wanted to go home and see his mother. Meehan later identified the child as William. He has never been heard from again. Investigators originally doubted the 3-year-old's story and thought William had simply wandered off. They searched neighborhood factory buildings and local canals without result and concluded that the child had in fact been abducted. The 3-year-old described the bougie man as a slender, elderly man with gray hair and a gray mustache. William's case was highly publicized but remained a mystery until 1934, when Albert Hamilton Fish was arrested. A photograph of Fish is posted with this case summary. He was charged with the murder of 10-year-old Grace Budd, who was abducted in 1928. He was caught after writing a letter to Budd's mother in which he described how he had killed her daughter. Fish led investigators to Budd's body after he was apprehended. During his trial, Meehan identified him as the man he saw with William the night the child disappeared. Fish confessed to William's murder, Budd's, and the slayings of several other children. He pleaded insanity at the Budd trial but was convicted and sentenced to death. He was not charged in any other cases. William's case was considered closed after Meehan's identification and Fish's confession. It is no longer being investigated by law enforcement. His remains have never been found, however.
Number 2.
Billy was last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico on September 22, 1979. He disappeared with his cousin, Mary Lou Cena. They were last seen in the vicinity of Edith Road and the 300 block of Mountain Road Northeast in the Martineztown neighborhood at 10 a.m. They left to go to the post office and never returned. Neither of them have been heard from again. The circumstances of the Cena children's disappearances are unclear. There are theories that they ran away, were abducted or accidentally got locked into a railcar while playing. There were rumors that they had been murdered and buried in the basement of a house in the Martineztown area, but this story was never confirmed. Authorities identified a possible suspect in the children's disappearances in 2011. Michael Cordova, who was Billy's mother's live-in boyfriend in 1979. Billy's sister stated Cordova was a drug dealer and grew marijuana in the family's backyard. His sister remembers that shortly before Billy and Mary Lou vanished, one of Cordova's marijuana plants went missing. Cordova blamed Billy for it and beat him severely. Authorities are trying to find and question Cordova, and they're also looking for a woman named Liza Ramirez, who lived at Billy's residence in 1979. Billy was a 6th grader at Truman Middle School at the time of his disappearance, and Mary Lou was a 4th grader at Longfellow Elementary School. Most of the children's relatives are deceased, but Billy's sister and Mary Lou's mother are alive. Their cases remain unsolved.
Number 3.
Janice was last seen leaving her family's home on Anthony Road in Toland, Connecticut on July 26, 1973. She planned to ride her metallic green Murray bicycle, which had a bell and a banana seat, through the neighborhood to search for a butterfly she'd caught and left on a rock a few days earlier. She was carrying an envelope to carry the butterfly in. It was the first time she'd been allowed to go out by herself. She never arrived home and has never been seen again. Janice's mother found her bike half an hour later on Rhodes Road near a wooded area less than a mile from her residence. The butterfly and envelope were never found. Authorities believe something happened to Janice after she had picked up the butterfly and was on her way home. Janice was one of 5 people to disappear in the general area during a 10-year time period. Another was Lisa White. All of the missing were female. They ranged in age from 7 to 20 years old. 2 of them were found deceased years after their disappearances, but the other 3, including Lisa, remain missing. It is not clear whether the cases are related. The late Charles Pierce, a pedophile who was suspected in many child disappearance cases in New England throughout the 1950s-1970s, confessed to Janice's murder. A photo of Pierce is posted with this case summary. He claimed to have buried her in the Lawrence, Massachusetts area near an unidentified boy who was another victim. The boy was thought to be Angelo Puglisi, a Massachusetts child who vanished 3 years after Janice in 1976. Neither of the supposed graves has been discovered. Another twist in the Janice case came in 2000 when the bone fragments of a child were discovered in the garage of Nathaniel Bar Jonah, a man charged with the 1996 abduction and presumed murder of Zachary Ramsey in Great Falls, Montana. The charges were later dismissed due to lack of evidence. Janice's name surfaced in connection with Bar Jonah when his criminal past came to light. He had served a prison sentence for the abduction and attempted murder of 2 boys in Massachusetts in 1977. Putting the possible scenario together, investigators learned that Bar Jonah lived in Webster, Massachusetts in 1973 when Janice disappeared. Webster is only 20 miles away from Toland, Connecticut, which is Janice's hometown. He would have been only 14 years old when Janice vanished, but Bar Jonah had already allegedly strangled a playmate by that time. There have been additional accusations that Bar Jonah practiced cannibalism in recent years. He was found guilty of 2 unrelated counts of child molestation in Montana in February 2002. Bar Jonah, whose given name was David P. Brown, claimed he was innocent of all charges against him. Authorities also investigated the possibility that he was involved in the 1997 Wyoming disappearance of Amanda Gallion. Amanda is classified as a runaway, but her social security number has not been used since 1997, and there is suspicion that she met with foul play. A handwritten list of names entitled Lake Webster was discovered in Bar Jonah's possession in December 2001. Some news reports stated that Andrew Amato was among the children featured in the list, but this is untrue. Andrew disappeared from Webster, Massachusetts in 1978. No one has been able to tie him to Bar Jonah. DNA testing conducted in 2001 on a bone located in Bar Jonah's Montana garage proved that it was not part of Zachary's, Janice's, or Amanda's remains. Andrew's DNA was not compared with the bone. Bar Jonah was never charged in connection with any of the other disappearances. He died of a blood clot in a Montana prison in April 2008 at age 51. Charges have not been filed against any person regarding Janice's disappearance. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 4.
Song was raised in Seoul, South Korea. She moved to the United States in 1995 to live with relatives in Springfield, Virginia near Alexandria. She graduated high school and enrolled in Pennsylvania State University, Penn State, where she majored in integrative arts. She was scheduled to graduate during the spring of 2002. Song attended a Halloween party during the early morning hours of November 1, 2001, at the Players nightclub in the 100 block of West College Avenue. She departed from the party at 2 a.m., then stopped by a friend's home for 2 hours. Another friend dropped Song off outside of her residence in State College Park Apartments in the 300 block of West Clinton Avenue at approximately 4 a.m. She had been drinking that evening and was mildly intoxicated when taken to her apartment. She has never been heard from again. Song's friends reported her as a missing person when she failed to contact anyone by November 4, 3 days after her disappearance. Nearly all of her personal belongings were inside of her residence, including her backpack and the cellular phone she normally carried. The false eyelashes that Song wore as part of her costume were located inside the apartment. Her keys and her purse, containing her credit cards and driver's license, were the only items missing from her home. Her cellular phone was turned off, and she didn't place any phone calls from her apartment after returning home, nor was there any indication of a struggle or foul play at the scene. Song's family, who traveled from South Korea to the United States after her disappearance, cleaned her apartment shortly after the initial police search, inadvertently destroying what physical evidence that might have been there. Song did not have any travel plans in November 2002. Her loved ones stated that it is uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. They also maintained that she was not suffering from any personal problems at the time of her disappearance. There has been no activity on her credit cards since her disappearance. Song broke up with her boyfriend a month before her disappearance, and her family members speculated that she might have chosen to leave or commit suicide as a result, but her roommates say she was getting over the breakup and was not depressed about it. Some people speculated that Song was abducted from her apartment, while others theorized that she may have been taken after walking to a nearby store, something she often did. There are few clues in her case. Police investigated the possibility that Song's disappearance was drug-related. Her diary entries indicate that she and her friends experimented with marijuana and ecstasy. However, there is no evidence that she used drugs on the night of her disappearance, and the drug theory was eventually discarded. Authorities received a tip from a woman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, nearly 200 miles from Song's apartment, shortly after Song disappeared. The witness claimed that she saw a woman matching Song's description inside a vehicle with an unidentified male in the city's Chinatown district. The witness said that the woman called for help, but the man interrupted her and told the witness to leave. Investigators said that the witness's story changed several times and they have been unable to verify her statements. Authorities are continuing to attempt to identify the man allegedly seen by the woman. He is described as having an olive or light brown complexion with medium-length hair. Investigators stated that the man is not a suspect in Song's case, but they would like to question him. Another possible lead was investigated when bank robber Hugo Marcus Selensky was arrested, and several sets of human remains, believed to be from between 5 and 12 people, were found in his backyard. None of the remains were from Song. Selensky told police that he and another man, Michael Jason Kurkowski Jr., saw Song on the night of her disappearance, mistook her for a prostitute, and kidnapped her, and kept her imprisoned in a walk-in safe in his home until she died. He says they then buried Song's body in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. Kurkowski could not confirm or deny Selensky's account because he was one of the people buried in Selensky's backyard. Selensky said he killed Kurkowski after learning that he had kept Song's bunny ears as a souvenir of the crime. One of Selensky's friends, however, told police that Selensky had boasted of the murder to him. Investigators have been unable to prove Selensky's involvement in Song's disappearance, but they have not ruled him out as a suspect either. He was acquitted of the murder charges against him, but was convicted of 2 counts of abuse of a corpse in March 2006. Minority groups on the Penn State College campus criticized both law enforcement and university officials for the lack of progress in Song's case. Authorities stated that they have investigated every lead in her disappearance, but there is minimal evidence. Song's case remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Leggett was last seen standing outside Ross Cotton Gin, her place of employment in Mercedes, Texas, on October 9, 1984. The establishment is owned by her father-in-law, and Leggett worked there as a secretary. At 4:30 p.m., a customer came to the business with a load of produce, and Leggett helped him weigh it. Shortly afterwards, she was seen talking to 2 males. They were standing next to Leggett's car and another white car, possibly a sports car. When the customer came by with another load at 5 p.m., Leggett was gone. Sketches of the 2 men Leggett was talking to are posted with this case summary. At 4:45 p.m. that same day, Leggett's parents received 2 phone calls saying she had been kidnapped and the abductors wanted a ransom. They thought it was a joke at first. They tried to call the Gin to see if Leggett was there, but got no answer. Her father then drove to the Gin and found her car parked there with her purse and keys inside. Leggett was in college studying to be an X-ray technician, and her books were found open on the desk in the office, with a pencil to mark her place. There was also a calculator turned on. Leggett herself was gone, however. She has never been heard from again. A ransom note was mailed to her family after her disappearance, demanding $250,000. The letter appeared to be in Leggett's handwriting, but the envelope was in another person's writing. Leggett's stepfather, Lefty Gardner, was a pilot and a member of the Confederate Air Force, now called the Commemorative Air Force, at the time of her abduction. Some theorize that Gardner refused to smuggle contraband into Mexico, and Leggett was abduction in retaliation for his refusal, but there is little evidence to support any theory. Leggett's husband was also looked at as a possible suspect. He cooperated fully with the investigation and maintains his innocence in her case. He obtained a divorce from Leggett after her abduction. Foul play is suspected in Leggett's case. She left behind her husband and 1-year-old son. Authorities believe Leggett was the victim of a homicide. No suspects have been named in her disappearance. It remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Kimberly spent the night of September 15, 1979, at a friend's residence across the street from her grandparents' home in Warren, Michigan. At 11 p.m., she called her sister and said she had sneaked out of her friend's home and was calling from an outdoor phone booth not far away. Her sister told her to go back inside. Kimberly never returned to her friend's home, however, and has never been heard from again. Authorities are uncertain what payphone Kimberly was calling her sister from. She said it was a short walk from her grandparents' home, but one witness said he saw her using the phone several miles away. Her case was originally classified as a possible runaway. There are few clues as to Kimberly's whereabouts, but her case is now classified as a non-family abduction with probable foul play involved in her disappearance. Investigators learned that Kimberly may have traveled to Grand Rapids, Michigan after her disappearance, but the leads did not pan out. Although one of Kimberly's sisters had run away from home several times and Kimberly herself was known to occasionally stay out until late at night, she does not have a history of runaway behavior, and authorities no longer believe she left of her own accord. Authorities theorized that Kimberly may have been a victim of a serial killer of children in Oakland County, Michigan. The killer, nicknamed the babysitter because he bathed and fed the children prior to their deaths, is believed to be responsible for the abductions and homicides of 2 boys and 2 girls around King's age in 1976 and 1977. The children were all held captive for several days before being slain. No one has ever been charged in connection with any of the murders. If Kimberly was a victim of the killer, her case is atypical. In the other cases, the victims' bodies were left out in plain view by roadways and were found fairly quickly, but Kimberly's remains have never been located. David Norberg was considered a suspect in the case for many years. He was employed in Warren at the time of Kimberly's 1979 disappearance and lived just 2 streets away from her home. He was killed in an automobile accident near Recluse, Wyoming in 1981. After his death, jewelry allegedly belonging to several of the Oakland County child victims was found among his belongings. He was never charged in connection with any of Kimberly's disappearance or any of the murders, however. Norberg's body was exhumed in September 1999, and his DNA was compared to a single strand of unidentified hair discovered on the final murder victim, Timothy King, no relation to Kimberly. In November 2002, authorities announced that Norberg's DNA did not match the hair found on Timothy, but that they were not ruling him out entirely as a suspect. He fits the serial killer's profile very well, and there is circumstantial evidence linking him to the murders. Investigators still think he might have been involved in Kimberly's apparent abduction, if not the murders. The Oakland County serial killer has never been identified, but one male victim's family sued a suspect, Ted Lamborghini, for his wrongful death in 2007. It is not clear whether Kimberly was a victim of the same person who killed the others. In 2018, authorities announced Arthur Ream was a possible suspect in Kimberly's case and in the disappearances of Cynthia Kuhn, Kim Laro, Nadine Odell and Kelly Brownlee. A photo of Ream is posted with this case summary. He was convicted of sexual assault in the 1970s and, in 1986, murdered Cindy Zarzicki, a 13-year-old girl who was dating his son. He was convicted of her murder and afterwards, in 2008, he led authorities to her body, which was buried in a shallow grave 30 miles from Detroit, Michigan. While in prison, Ream reportedly told cellmates he was serial killer with 4 to 6 victims. In May 2018, police began digging at the same property where Cindy had been buried, expecting to find the bodies of other missing girls there. No human remains were located, however, and the digging stopped after a week. Kimberly's grandmother died in 1995. Prior to her death, she purchased a cemetery plot for her granddaughter. Kimberly's 2 sisters still hope she may be located. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 7.
Alice was last seen near her family's residence at Tyson's Lane Apartments in the 600 block of Tyson's Lane in the New York City borough of Staten Island on July 7, 1972. Alice was playing in the lobby of the building with her brother. She vanished at approximately 3:30 p.m. after her brother left her alone for a brief moment. Alice may have been sighted shortly thereafter in a park near the apartment building in the New Dorp area of the island. She has never been heard from again. Her mother reported her missing at 6:15 p.m. Her parents were separated at the time of her disappearance. She lived with her mother and her father lived in Manhattan. Authorities at first believed the child's father had taken her, but he was later cleared as a suspect. Andre Rand, a mentally incompetent convicted child sex offender, is a prime suspect in Alice's case. Photos of him Rand are posted with this case summary. He worked as a painter in Tyson's Lane Apartments at the time of Alice's disappearance. Rand, whose birth name is Frank Ration, is also believed to be connected to the 1978 disappearance of Ethel Atwell, the 1983 disappearance of Tyahis Jackson, and the 1984 disappearance of Henry Gaforio, among other missing persons cases. There is speculation he may have been involved in the 1977 New York disappearance of Audrey Nierenberg as well. In 2004, he was convicted of kidnapping in the 1981 abduction of Holly Hughes. All of the victims vanished from the Staten Island area, with the exception of Nierenberg. Rand was previously convicted of the 1987 New York abduction of Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome, whose remains were discovered near his former campsite on the grounds of the now-defunct Staten Island Developmental Center, formerly known as the Willowbrook State School. Volunteers continue to search the abandoned property twice a year for evidence related to Rand's other alleged victims, but nothing has been discovered. The Staten Island Developmental Center was several miles southeast of Alice's apartment building. Rand has maintained his innocence in all charges against him. Alice's case remains unsolved.
Number 8.
Alice was last seen in Fort Campbell, Kentucky sometime during 1974 and 1975. She was living on post with her 2 small children and her husband, Lee Andrew Jefferson, a soldier who was assigned there between March 1973 and July 1975. She left her vehicle and clothes behind and has never been heard from again. Alice's children were 5 and 6 at the time of her disappearance. Lee is not their father. The children remember that one day no one picked them up from school and they eventually walked home alone. They had to knock on the door for a long time before Lee finally answered, sweating and agitated, claiming he had been asleep. Alice was gone, and Lee refused to let the children into their bedroom and made them sleep with him. A few days later he took them to stay with Alice's parents in Arkansas and never returned. Lee later claimed he did contact the authorities about Alice's disappearance, and Alice's parents also attempted to report her missing, but an official police report wasn't filed until 2013, nearly 40 years after she was last seen. Alice's children believe her husband murdered her, but Lee has never faced charges in her case and continues to maintain she simply left him. She has relatives living in the states of Arkansas, Indiana, Florida, Kentucky, Pennsylvania and Tennessee. Her case remains unsolved.